Hello and welcome to my channel. In today's video I'm going to be doing an Aquilegia flower using watercolour. Now some of you might know this more as a columbine or a granny's bonnet. We all have different names for things, but Aquilegia is obviously the Latin, so that's the easiest one to remember for everybody to know that we're talking about the same flower, because where you are in the world this might be called something different. So this was actually a photograph I took in my own garden a couple of days ago. The absolutely beautiful flowers because they just self-seed everywhere and they come in so many different colours. So to begin with, as you'll see, I did a pencil drawing. Now when you're drawing flowers or painting flowers, the easiest thing to do is to start by blocking in the basic shape, because they're all so different. So with this it sort of looked a little bit like a lampshade. So there was a square shape. If you look at the top part of the Aquilegia, those little, I don't know what they're called, the little bits at the top fit almost into a square, and then the bottom part fits almost into this triangular shape. And if you just pop those guidelines in, it becomes much easier to fit all the petals and everything into that. So it's quite a complicated flower, which is why I took a close-up of it. And this actually would be nice to do just on its own, perhaps much bigger with just a plain white background, much more as a botanical study. And I found it easier when I came to do the flower, doing it painting wet onto dry, and then you can get those shadows, highlights and veins in a lot better, because there's an awful lot of detail in there than if you do it wet in wet. Of course you could do it wet in wet as well, the preference is yours. I did the background wet in wet, but like I say, it would be quite nice just with a crisp white background and do a really detailed long botanical study, because this photograph's got so much detail in it with the little veins there and the way the petals are curling in different directions. So one thing that I don't like about the finished painting really is I should have had some darker greens in the background just to pop those highlights out on the foreground flower. I also didn't really have enough highlights in the foreground flower, and also I wasn't too thrilled with my choice of reds. However, having said that, because this flower cross-pollinates and self-seeds, it comes in absolutely loads of colours, so you can really sort of choose whatever colours you wanted. You could do this a completely different colour. I've got lots of nice blues, purples and mauve ones in the garden, as well as some very pale pinks. So I didn't actually use too many colours. I kept the colours quite simple. For the darker mix, for the shadows on the flower, I mixed two of them together. I used the violet and the alizarin together. So with your shadow colours, either add a little touch of blue or purple to your colours to make them a bit deeper, or just layer them up and use another layer on top of the same colour just to make that area a bit darker. So I began by wetting the whole page and just dropping some colours in very, very wet into that background, and not putting too much colour around the area of the flower, and then allowed that to absolutely completely dry before I worked on top of it. One little tip I'll give you for the stems, you'll see that I used the two colours of the green and the red, went down one side of the stem with the green and then the other side with the red whilst they were wet, and let them merge together, because as with many flowers, you'll see the colour of the flower is quite often in the stem. And this is a good tip actually if you're buying a plant and it isn't in flower and you're not sure, particularly at this time of year, if you go into the shops now, you'll see a geranium plants, and if it's got a completely green leaf and a completely green stem, it's going to be a white geranium. The geraniums that have colour in them, the red ones and the pink ones, you'll see a little bit of that red and pink in the leaf. So that's a good tip when you're buying plants that haven't actually got the flower on them yet and you don't know what colour they are. You'll often see that colour in the stem. So one of the reasons I was doing this today was I wrote a little blog, I think it was a few days ago now, about reference photos, and this reference photo I've put on Pixabay. You'll know that I recommend Pixabay an awful lot on this channel, and I use them for my reference photographs for you. And the reason for that is because they are copyright free, so I know that when I'm painting with them, or when you're painting with them afterwards, and maybe if you go on to exhibit your work or whatever, you're absolutely fine knowing that you're safe in the knowledge that you are not breaching anybody's copyright using those photographs of Pixabay. But I think some people are still quite unclear about the rules regarding copyright. So I did a blog on that a few days ago, and I will put the link in the description below to that if those of you that like to work from reference photographs want to go and have a look at that. It'll tell you a bit more about that. Like I say, I have my own Pixabay page. I'll also link that below, and part of the reason for that is because I use it so much, I feel it's only right that I also share my photographs for other people to use. Okay, so that was one of the things I wanted to talk to you today about, really, was just go and have a look at that blog. If you are using photographs quite a lot, it will just clear things up a bit, because I think the problem is nowadays we're absolutely bombarded with images all the time, particularly on things like Instagram, and it's very easy to think that it's okay just to copy them, and it isn't. So the technique I'm using today is a really good one for doing any sort of garden flowers, especially an herbaceous border where you've got all that colour in the background. I've gone a bit too heavy with the pinks and purples in the background, and I should have had more green in there. Like I said earlier, some darker greens to set those flowers forward a bit where the highlights were. But it's a bit splodgy where some of my pinks and mauves were there in the background. Maybe they needed a little bit more water in them. But it's all an experimenting thing. You can have a bit of a play with doing some nice loose backgrounds, but keep them loose and keep them pale. Let them dry. You know, you want them to be quite watery so that when they dry very pale, so that pushes them into the background and makes them very impressionistic and hazy, and then all your detail can be on your foreground flower, which you can spend more time on and making that a real focal point. So you could do this with any flower. There's loads of flower reference photographs on Pixabay. Just choose your favourite flower and have a go at doing one of these loose backgrounds like this. And if it doesn't work, the other thing is you can always, if you're not happy with it in the end, you can always cut around your flower and you maybe use it in a collage, or you can use the abstract background in a collage. You could also do a really nice abstract-y, impressionistic background like this using Brusho, keeping it very simple and very dilute, and then working on top with your focal flower. So when you get to the point of painting your flower, don't forget to leave some white paper and leave that dry so that you've got those highlights there. One thing that you could have done would be to use masking fluid also, of course. There's all sorts of ways, we've talked about this before, all sorts of ways of getting your highlights back. You could have used masking fluid, you could have used a wax resist. The main thing with your wax resist is you can't get it off again, so you've got to be very confident about where you're putting it. So if you're not so confident, I wouldn't recommend that. You need to be confident with your drawing where you're putting it, and of course because it's white it doesn't always show up. And the other thing is you can come back and put something else over the top, so you could put an acrylic or a white ink over the top to get those highlights back. But again, don't overdo your highlights. Looking at this picture now as I'm doing this voiceover, I think I would have much preferred to do, in hindsight, a bigger flower taking up much more of the page and not bothering really too much with the background, maybe leaving it white and doing a real good botanical study, because if you look at the photograph there's so many lines there. And if you do want to do it in that way, what I would really recommend is you just build it up very, very slowly and gradually, allowing your paint to dry in between each layer and building up the layers and the shadows and the highlights in that way. So, you know, do a layer, go and have a cup of tea, don't let it run into each other. Do it really nice and crisp, and keep a nice crisp edge on it if you're going to leave your background white. Okay, so I'm trying to think really if there's anything else I want to tell you about that. I will list the colours down below in the description. Like I said, I wasn't too happy with my choices of pinks, maybe partly because I didn't allow it to be pinky. I didn't let the paper come through enough and have enough white highlights. So if you're new to my channel, thank you very much for joining us today, and thank you also for all my recent subscribers. So I've had a lot more subscribers in the last week or so, which is really lovely. So thank you also for joining us. Don't forget there's a bell icon down below as well that you can hit, and that will give you notifications, even if you're already subscribed and you've not done that. If you do that, it will give you notifications of when my new videos are out. But they're out on a regular basis every Monday afternoon and Thursday afternoon, and we do a variety of subjects, so not just watercolour, all sorts of drawing techniques and other media as well, and quite a few Brusho and Inktense videos. So if there's anything particular that you would like me to do, if you could put that in the comments below, and I'll get on with that as soon as possible. And if you also want to ask about this painting and any extra tips that I might have forgotten to tell you about what I'm doing here, If you want to put that in the comments below, I'll get back to you as soon as I can. That might not always be immediately, it just depends how busy I am. I'm getting quite a lot of comments now and it takes a little bit of catching up with, but I do try and do them at least once a day if I get the chance. And please feel free to go along to my Pixabay page. Like I say, I will put that in the description below along with everything else from this video. And if you go along there, you'll see I've got loads of photographs, and please feel free to download any of them. You don't have to print them off to work from them. You can obviously work from them from your computer screen or even from your smartphone or tablet. The good thing about working from your smartphone and tablet is that you can zoom in and out onto the detail. But you'll find lots of pictures there, because mostly from around and about my home, lots from in my garden because I love my flowers and my gardening, and quite a few of the cows and things like that as well. But please do feel free to get those pictures and have a look at them and use them in your own reference. Even if you want to sell them, that's absolutely fine. So that's a great thing about Pixabay. I hope to welcome you back to my channel again soon. In the meantime, enjoy your painting and drawing. Let me know how you get on with this in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and bye for now.